Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The book Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, came out in 2020, followed by Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Then Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children came out as a bestseller, along with Raised by These Wolves Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through the Foster Care and Court Systems, which came out July 17th as a bestseller. And please feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I have a return guest. I'm so happy to have my friend Laurie Smith back on. She was last on season 3, episode 170, season 4. 37, 74, and 153, and season 5, episodes 102 and 139. The last time we spoke, we talked about being proactive and know your ACEs scores, which was very fascinating. And we're going to talk today about shame on spooked and what happens when your story is being written for you and you have no control over that. I totally welcome you, Laurie Smith, LMSW. Welcome back.
I mean, you're going over how many times I've been on it. It's really surprising but there's a lot to talk about in this area. So yeah, I'm glad to be back.
I'm glad you're back. You have a lot of insight and have helped
Yeah,
a lot of people. So I'm very
good.
happy to have you on.
Good, thank you. Yeah, so like I'm excited about this topic. It's one of my favorite in terms of these are horrific things that your audience is experiencing. I've experienced them, you've experienced them in different ways. But when when a story is told about us that is not the entire truth or is misunderstood or misconstrued, it evokes a lot of feelings, and one of them is shame. And you and I were talking a little bit before the podcast, and I have that webinar I created a couple of years ago. I like to theme my things to make them a little bit more digestible, and so I talked about shame in this webinar in the lens of goblins and ghosts and like cleaning out your closets and like how we're typically very scared to look at those things, but
Mm-hmm.
also until we look directly at them, we can't become unscared. We can't become equipped with tools on how to deal with things we didn't ask to have, like shame and trauma and a story that is half truth or untruth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people, they go through a variety of issues, whether it be criminal court or family court, and there's a false narrative being told about
Yeah.
you. And you may not want everyone to know about this.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you like
Very,
to
yeah.
keep private.
What's very embarrassing, it is something that most of us have never even considered that we'd ever have to experience in life. It is confusing, and it really rocks the foundation of everything that we thought was true and what we had learned was true about the world.
Mm-hmm.
People have good intentions, people want to help us. This is, the people that we love aren't going to let us down. All of those things really comes to very viscerally a smashing halt in these type of circumstances where we experience what I just call it a Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. It just, the people you think you can trust, which would be your
Hmm.
family members, and these are the
Right.
people that let you down the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, again, when we come into a situation like this, we have a really hard time ourselves trying to make sense of it and figure it out. One of the ways that we do that, trauma works in different ways. As a child, we will internalize it as our fault.
Hmm.
As adults, we might even still be on some level internalizing it as our fault. I'm not even talking about if it really, who's to decide whose fault is where. But when we are faced with a court system that says you're doing it wrong, you're not good enough, you're doing it bad, it really triggers every internal insecurity that we were conditioned to have in this world.
Hmm.
There isn't really a lot of people I know, and I'm a social worker, I work with trauma. There isn't a lot of people I know in this world who don't walk around internally internalizing the hierarchy we live in. And what I mean by that is, we can use patriarchy, we can use all kinds of different hierarchies, but there is a different level of people that we are conditioned to believe. So what I mean by that is, the higher at the top you are, the better we are, the better we are conditioned to believe you are as a human. And the lower you fall, you are less than, not good enough. You have to work harder to prove yourself.
Mhm.
So whatever, plug and play the hierarchy we live in, but we do not live in an equilateral humanistic valuing world. We live in the idea that we have to try harder to get higher on that hierarchy so that our safety and our needs will be met. And before I go down a deep rabbit hole on that, I just want to digest that for a second.
Mhm.
We are conditioned from birth to believe that the higher up the ladder we go, the safer we will be.
Right.
And that is historically, that is true in terms of external resources: food, running water, money, access to the resources we need, all of those things. It is unfortunately really crappy and true that the higher you go up the hierarchy, the higher the illusion of safety is, that you will have access to those things. So when somebody comes along and says, culturally, externally, you're doing it wrong.
Mhm.
You're not good enough. You have a legal case against you. What we have been conditioned to believe is we thus then are less than as a human.
Mhm.
We have less value. And that's really confusing because, again, our mind and body are conditioned to believe, but not me, but not me. I'm immune from that. I should be immune from that, from X, Y, and Z. How is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it.
Mhm.
I didn't cause this, maybe. And so I don't know if I'm making sense in terms of the conditioning we have, that when you have a public thing like this happen that's so against the morals, that you know, I'm a good person, I don't deserve this. Whether that's true or not, we're going to feel like we're less of a human and that we have something to be ashamed of, and that we just need to try harder. And this is not the equation. I'm not saying don't try hard, but this is not the equation where working harder equals a successful legal case.
Right. Right.
Working smarter, working differently, under like renegotiating how we look and see and feel and experience the world is necessary, but just working harder is not going to be a legal win.
Mhm. Mhm. See, there are people that are professionals, doctors, nurses, that get caught up into these systems.
Right.
And you're thinking, well, gee, I've done all the right things. I've lived my life
Right.
right. And now this lie is being told about me. And now I'm losing my career. It's like, now what?
Right. Right. But all of that internally says, it's so confusing because, again, I should be safe and immune from losing my career, from
Hmm.
losing my stat. Like, I should be safe and immune from gossip and being the bad guy because maybe I've done so many good things in this world. I should be immune from this. But a legal case like this, working our butts off to try and disprove that to the general public, and I will say the people not in the arena, and by the arena I mean getting attacked by animals, like,
Hmm.
if you're not the one in the case, catering to the public who is not going to understand what you're going through is working harder, not smarter.
Right. Right.
Working smarter is talking the legal language to your lawyers, determining the legal strategy, understanding what the courts want and need from this transactional relationship. Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, the arena has a lot of information, but the people telling stories about us will never, by default, that they're not us, will never have all of the information.
Right. Right. And I noticed a problem with other parents that I've talked to is that they lose family members over
Yeah,
these things, whether they're talking too much about their court case or even not wanting to talk about their court case, but another family member wants to tell another family member
right.
who may be friends with the opposing side.
Yeah. And that's again really confusing when we are conditioned to believe that family is not going to betray you, that family will keep your best interest. And the reality is there are just several really good reasons why family can't and maybe doesn't have the capacity always to keep our best interest in mind. Again, they don't have enough information. They just simply will never have all of the missing puzzle pieces. The only person, the only person that has enough information to make a decision about what your next steps may be or how to go through is the person experiencing the trauma, because they have what it feels like internally, they have the details externally, they have their life experience, their tools, they have all of the pieces to be able to determine how to move forward from this. But we get really, again, our conditioning gets really, really wrapped up in, but I'm trying to please this person, and this person says I should do this, and this person, I don't want them to talk about me, so maybe I'll behave differently for them not to talk about me.
Mhm.
And they're telling a story that's wrong about me, so maybe I'll try to prove them wrong and try to educate them out of their misinformation. And that's exhausting. It
Mhm.
reduces our resources, and it diverts us from spending that time on, again, the only expert in the case, which is ourselves,
Mhm.
and what we need and what we need to do and how to take care of ourselves, because simply other people just don't know, and they will, because they're human, they will let us down.
Right. Right. Eh,
They don't have enough go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
They don't have enough information. The information they have is seen through the lens of their internal and external life experience.
Mhm.
Okay, so another layer of complication, because I could have a twin sister who sees my experience in an absolutely completely different way, because she is by just different genes highlighted, different genetics, different life experiences, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. There's a number of reasons why those we care about and love are unable to see the entire truth. And they will see it skewed through their own lens of experience. So by default, all of those stories are inherently biased.
Mhm.
My own story about myself is biased, by the way. Like
Mhm.
the story I've created and tell about myself is biased. Uh, I get to do that. I'm the one that experienced it. Thank you very
Right.
much. And also, yeah, I'm biased in support of myself, and nobody else has been, by the way.
Right. Thank you.
So, um, so they don't have enough information. They will experience it through the lens of their own life experience and conditioning and all of that. But it is inherently biased because it is coming from a place, their version is coming from a place that must meet their needs.
Very, very, yeah, that's the ticket.
That's really important to consider.
A lot of these parents are saying, why isn't my family loyal? I mean, what blood is thicker than water? And apparently it's not.
And also, so when I talk about their needs, it's not always a conscious need. But let's say the family, let's just take a dysfunctional, not well functioning family unit system. The system, everybody has a role to play,
Mhm.
and if somebody disrupts the way that system is functioning, it just causes chaos. Period, which is very uncomfortable for all the other parts of that system. Okay, so if you're a good daughter, but you have a legal case coming against you, it the system is going to have a hard time computing that you are not playing the role of the good daughter. So
Mhm.
they need to recalibrate that system any way they can to get it functioning again, as
Mhm.
close to the old normal as possible. Okay, my people following me, do you think?
Yes. Yes. They
And
want
so
to
if
see you as what you were before all this stuff happened.
right, right. And the reality is you can't be that person anymore. You will never, you can't unsee and unexperience the things that we've gone through. So if the system itself is disrupted, what the first instinct, the survival instinct, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, is to get things back surviving, grasping at straws, trying to maybe push you into an old role, or maybe I have so much anxiety about the system being chaotic that I need to go gossip to somebody and I need to make up stories because I need some sense of control.
Hmm. Or maybe even attention.
Maybe I need but again, maybe I'm feeling neglected and abandoned by the person experiencing all the, maybe they were the strong person in the family system and now the family system doesn't have the strong person. So we got to create, we got to, without consciousness, create some kind of strong person. We've got to create some kind of normalcy, which is where maybe I start creating stories about it because I need to make meaning and make sense of it as an external person. And as, you know, as somebody not experiencing it, it doesn't make sense to me. So I need to make some sort of sense of it. I'm going to create stories, or I'm going to go with the lowest hanging fruit of a story because I just need to get back to some inner stability within myself. So
Yeah.
I say this to reflect that people, most of the time in my experience, 25 years now, most of the time people don't hurt other people purposely. Now, yes, that does happen, but
Mhm.
most of the time the hurt is from somebody doing something, just a behavior that hurts us by default. Like it's not even, it's not personal, it's not about us, it really is about themselves needing to have some kind of internal survival, and we may be the bad guy in their story.
Hmm. Hmm.
But again, our conditioning teaches us we're not the bad guy. The other person's the bad guy. I can never be like, we can't sit with being a bad guy, which is why I encourage us to go to therapy. But because if you're not the bad guy in somebody's story, I don't know if you're living.
Hmm.
That's not living. That is masking all day, every day to prevent being the bad guy in some story. Because anytime we meet our own need, anytime, if I go to like, I'm going to impact other people in the world anytime I try to meet my need. If I go for cereal in my cupboard this morning, somebody made that cereal. I am maybe leaving a dish. I'm impacting the world just by meeting a need.
Hmm.
If I breathe, I'm impacting the world. I'm impacting the trees. And I'm getting a little bit out there, but I want to bring this in. If I meet my need in a system that is unhealthy, that system is going to reject me probably,
Hmm.
because the system most of the time is not set up for each individual to have their needs met. So if I'm in a community of people talking about me and telling a story about me, again, I need to understand they don't have enough information. They have a lens through which they see it. They have their own bias, and me being true and authentic to myself and meeting my own needs is a threat to that system. So I will be the bad guy to somebody.
Right, because you don't know whoever they told the story to could be for the opposing side.
And we have no control over that.
That's why
We Go ahead.
that's what's so hard to understand for a lot of parents is like, well, these people have known me for over 30 years. What don't they get? You know?
They've known a version of you.
Hmm.
Again, they've known the version that fits in this system. There is a version now they can't compute, and it's not able to be comprehended. So their behaviors are based on them surviving this, not you. And so they may tell stories about you. They
Hmm.
may be the bad guy. You may be rejected. And that is an invitation to point back into ourselves and ask ourselves if we are keeping ourselves, how are we keeping ourselves safe?
Hmm.
In a in the midst of a story being told about us, I have no control over what other people say about me. That's that. If I try, I will be spinning my wheels and exhausting myself.
Hmm.
take what I've just explained, all of the reasons they have a sort of a clouded lens on this. That is a cognitive way to separate ourselves a little bit and buffer ourselves from the pain of this, because we are going to need therapy. We've been rejected, we've been betrayed, we've been misunderstood, all of those things. Those are internal experiences. Okay, so that's a buffer to the external, but internally, what am I doing about being hurt by this person? What am I doing for myself that I feel betrayed? What am I doing for myself so that I make sure I don't believe the same story they're telling? And
Mm-hmm.
I better make damn sure I know the story that I am telling. And that's where we get lost, because because of our conditioning, where I started in the beginning, we are taught to believe other people's truths above our own. We are taught to believe that, again, if we do something out of social conditioning, then we're lower on the hierarchy. We're taught to believe that we need to prove and earn our worth in our family system
Mm-hmm.
or community system. And this is a direct threat to our worth from conditioning externally coming into us. It's a direct threat to our worth that somebody's telling a story that's not true. If I don't have control over the story somebody's telling me, though, what do I have control over? Inside, I've got a lot of control about how I experience being rejected,
Mm-hmm.
being misunderstood. I better work hard. This is where I'm working smarter, not harder. I better work on the story I'm telling myself about myself. I better work on the support I'm giving myself. I better go inward. Whatever I'm feeling I'm not getting in the world. Maybe I've been betrayed. Maybe I've been misunderstood. Am I doing that to myself internally too? Am I buying the stories they're telling? Because if I am working for the enemy.
Right. And a lot of parents have a problem with this. They'll see, friends they used to know, and, these people won't even look them in the eye. And it's like, but you know me.
Right.
It's
And
very hard to
again,
compute.
so, so I want to gently push those people out of the equation. What is happening is you are feeling grieving. You're feeling sorrow and sadness and maybe anger and rejection and all of that. How are you dealing with that? That is not within their control. It's really shitty to have somebody know you for 30 years and then turn their back on you. That does not feel good. How are you dealing with the feeling? That's what we are not taught in this country. Like we just
Mhm.
culturally are not taught about that. And so this is again why somebody with my skills could be helpful in your corner, because they are going to nudge you. Okay, this isn't the first time you've been sad. This isn't the first time you've been angry. Is this re-triggering something that happened in your, childhood? Um, this isn't fair. It's really shitty. Who's sitting with you and holding that space? Because the people you thought would do that don't, for whatever reason, have the capacity to do so.
Mhm.
Don't have the capacity. It's not a, it's whether they wanted to or not, there is a barrier for them being able to show up for you. And here's the really even more sad reality: there isn't another human alive that can fill all of our feels.
Mhm.
We like to believe that safety,
Mhm.
but they're human. By default, they're going to mess it up. Like whether you talk about imperfection or sin or whatever, like by default, humans are imperfect.
Mhm.
But where are we learning the skills to take care of ourselves and how to take care of ourselves and how to talk to ourselves in a way that is not abusive, as abusive as the experiences many of us are leaving? And that's what I talk about in my webinars, and I've got other courses and stuff, but the Shame Unspooked particularly is about all the ways that we have learned to internalize shame and be embarrassed about things, and how to really look at that in a humorous, semi-benign way, and decide what we want to do with the mess that we didn't even ask to be given.
Mhm.
And so whether it's cognitive behavioral tools, whether it's somatic tools, which are mind-body tools, whether it is internal family systems work where we create different, the executive committee in our head and we learn to talk to ourselves different, whether it is creating what I call buffers. I do some skill work around creating safety internally, even in a chaotic world. Again, these are all things absolutely 100% within our control. I could be in a prison. I hope I'm not, and I am sorry that you
Yeah.
have had that experience. I could be in a prison and still use these tools to nurture and nourish and resource myself. I could be bombs overhead, unfortunately, and
Mhm.
use these skills. What this does, it does not fix the outside, and that's what we are trying so hard to do.
Well, when you
The
mentioned,
outside,
oh, I'm sorry. When you
no, go
mentioned
ahead.
being in prison, I was feeding myself positive information into my head.
Yeah, and that probably helped you survive.
Right.
And the beauty and the curse of that is that nobody else could do that but you.
Mm-hmm.
The people that you wanted to have your story right, the people that you wanted to support you, they could not do that as well and as efficiently as you could. The world will not teach us these things because this is actually called empowerment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When individuals empower themselves or meet their own need, it's two different ways to say the same thing. When we empower ourselves to be more fully human and accepting and whole, it is a direct threat. It's going to impact everybody around us. It's a direct threat to any system we've played a role in. That doesn't necessarily mean we go back to playing a role in that system. It means that the landscape has shifted, but we can learn how to be okay even if.
Mm-hmm.
As much as we've learned to be okay, not we've learned to be we've learned to pretend to be okay in really shitty circumstances. We can use that same pretending for our own benefit in the circumstances where nobody else is showing up to fucking help us. Excuse my
Right.
language.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's like other parents tell me that, well, my relatives never called and they said, when I did talk to them later, well, we just wanted to give you your privacy. It's like, gee, they you really needed their emotional support during this time. They could have at least checked on you and said, "Hey, John, what is there anything you need? Do you want to go out to lunch and talk?"
Right. But here's when somebody, even just take a funeral for example, people don't know how to deal with death. If you've not been taught how to deal with a legal case, where's the fucking manual on that?
I know,
We don't
right?
have one.
Right?
So other people are so innocently doing the best that they can to have their own stability in this.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. If they have that right, you have that right.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing, if we can just remember that they're doing the best they can with the information they have to keep their own stability, it becomes less personal, but also then it again, if we're pointing fingers at them, there's one pointing back to us. What are we doing to make sure that we're okay? Do we want to be around somebody who is telling stories that are untrue? Do we want to be around somebody that we can't control their behavior and their behavior is going to harm us? Do we need to limit our exposure? Do we need to find our support and resources from another entity?
Funny you should say that because I've talked to, some parents on Facebook where they said they're keeping their circle small,
Yeah,
like limit it to 5 to 6 friends, and I've always said, just talk to people that have been through it. They get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And there's a reason for that. Again, that is a community of support, and there isn't anybody externally that can translate this as well as we can who's experienced it. It took me years to digest and understand the harm that I have experienced. It, years to make some sort of sense of it. That wasn't me. I was being painted as the the, the bad guy,
Mhm.
and it took me years to process all the levels of harm that caused. But also, it's taken, in those same years, I have spent investing in how to take care of myself in a different way, because again, I've had to build boundaries with certain people in my life. Maybe I don't let them in as much because their actions hurt me.
Mhm.
Maybe I build a community over here because it's more supportive to me and they understand. And also, there's not enough time in the day for me to explain at the level of my current understanding. I can't translate my experience for you.
Mhm.
A, it's not my job, but B, I'm not going to exhaust myself trying to explain the unthinkable to you who has never experienced it, and I'll never be able to convince you how viscerally destructive this was.
Oh, right.
And so I know I am at peace with how very difficult this was for me, but I also know that there's a certain amount of my truth that you maybe can't handle.
Mhm.
And so maybe I shouldn't be sharing it with you because you can't handle it. And that's
Mhm.
my responsibility.
That's also another good point, because people seem to think they can trust someone that they're telling their story to that
Yeah.
is very fragile. And the story is, it's just so deep. The person that they think they can trust and talk about this to isn't going to get it. And they don't
And
know
but
that.
they don't know that yet, but they will learn that. And I like to say, isn't this good information?
Mhm.
Whether we like it or not, somebody else's behavior will show us information.
Mhm.
That is an invitation. Oh, I thought I could trust them and they took my story and they completely just, whatever with it. Well, isn't that is really good information for me so that I can make my next decision.
Mhm.
But if I'm not dealing with the hurt and the betrayal and the sadness and the grieving on my own end,
Mhm.
I'm not going to process that enough to be able to make my next, like I'm going to be stuck in the weeds of like, why did they do this? Why did they do this? Let's stop asking what's going on here? How are you feeling? This doesn't feel good. This is information. What do you want to do with it? You're the only one that can do something with it.
Oh,
And
that's
again, like if we were taught that, we would we would discover things in our relationships so much sooner. And I'm not saying we could have avoided any of this because I don't get to write the universe,
Mhm.
but we would have started to notice some things in our own relationships, or something's off, and we're purposely conditioned to not listen to that internal instinct.
That's very true. We're not. We didn't learn this. No one, there was no handbook out. There used to be, I don't know if you remember this or heard of this. It was like a workbook called I'm Okay, You're Okay.
That's long. This is in the 80s.
That's right. I think it was even 70s.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because I remember my mother going over this with me for self-esteem,
uh
and I'm an extrovert anyway, but hearing this about, other relatives that have done me wrong or what, it's almost like at this point, I don't even care.
that they've done you wrong, or would you don't care about what?
I don't care that, like they have gone to the other side. They've been flying monkeys for the ex.
But the care, the shift in care that you devote to that has shifted because you decided to do something with the information you were given.
Hmm.
Like, you were in control of the level of caring. I want to emphasize the internal processes going on here, because their behavior didn't change. Your way of being was the thing that needed to change for you to survive that. We cannot we'll spend our whole lives trying. We cannot depend on the outside world to meet our needs. It is
Right.
by default undependable. It is by default chaotic. It is by default hell, if you will. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is that is not where we're going to find stability. The illusion is we keep trying and we keep spinning our wheels, and the external world will, we'll get some illusion of safety. Oh, nice. Maybe I have $250,000 in the bank. Oh, I don't know. Maybe you live in hurricane territory and there goes your 250. Like that's not
Uh-huh.
stability.
Right.
Authentic, raw, internal nervous system regulation, which is also a book I have and I teach in my courses. Learning how to run your life from an internal, not external point of view means that you start focusing on yourself a little bit more. And again, is it healthy for me to be around people who continue to hurt me? It's painful. I
Mhm.
have to grieve over that. I have some people in my family I'm no contact with. I have to be sad that those relationships are no longer in my life. I don't have to be, but in order to digest it, I'm sad and angry, and I'm going to have waves of frustration. Like, why can't you like step blah blah blah, but I'm the one left with the feeling. What am I going to do with the feeling? I'm going to tend to the feeling. I'm going to nourish myself. I'm going to maybe allow myself to feel the pain of that because it isn't fair.
Mhm.
It's not supposed to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. And stop. And we just need to stop shooting on ourselves, because the shoulds, those are long gone.
Right.
Anything that should have happened, this is not that game. The game here is that it's a Twilight Zone. All bets are off. The rules have been completely manipulated and twisted. I better make sure that I'm taking care of myself, because there is nobody that can do it as good as I can.
Yeah, very well put. And people need to understand that. And this is why I'm glad we talked so we could get people to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's helpful. I hope I've made a little bit of sense. I mean, it's hard to condense this type of experience into things that are going to be helpful in 40 minutes, but it is a very real experience for the person experiencing it.
Mhm.
But the answers are not outside. The answers, we have a gold mine of answers internally. We have a gold mine of tools and resources and skills and knowledge that we have been conditioned to look away from. But I like to grow that stuff inside. I like to help people look towards it and like water that garden, because boy, that's a
Mhm.
different ball game. When you are able to meet some of your own needs, when you're able to regulate your nervous system without somebody else's approval, when you're able to somehow, don't care how, survive an experience like this, nobody else has done that but you.
Mhm.
That, I'm not going to argue with that success record. It might have been muddy, it might not have been pretty how you survive this, but the only person that can figure out how to survive it is the one experiencing it, period. And so when we look at shame and stuff, shame is a tool to condition us back into sort of alignment with the outside world.
Mhm.
This is a calling you, inviting you, pushing you, kicking and screaming to build alignment with yourself internally, because that's the only way you're going to be able to survive.
Most definitely. I agree with that. Yeah. I'm
We've
so
talked about a
glad.
lot. I don't know.
Hi, that was excellent. I thought that was great. And I was going to ask you, how can people find your Shame Unspooked?
Yeah, so I have a link tree, and I think if you don't have it, I'll send you a link. It's a link tree. I'm a social worker in my day job. I work with trauma, harm reduction, and also late stage undiagnosed neurodivergence, which is a whole nother
Mhm.
way that life is unfair. Um, but I'm also a coach, and I've created my coaching courses and books to have like a lower easier access. So some of them are $5, some of them are 20, some of them are 100, whatever. I mean, but it's psychoeducation and mental health tools, like a kind of a DIY stuff, because
Mhm.
unfortunately my field is good and I do recommend therapy for this, but we are so narrow in our focus in terms of like the types of tools we use, that I became a coach to expand the options, um, and pull from a lot of different sources, because this really is a one-man show.
Hmm. Hmm.
We live in community, we live in a legal system, but the way that things are in this world today, those are not set up for our survival. So
Right.
how do we survive?
Exactly. This is why I'm so glad I have a trauma coach on. This is so great to have a trauma coach on. People don't realize this is so important.
Yeah, and I mean, it's nice that listen, if somebody had a white picket house fence life, the tools would be needed, excuse me, the tools needed to survive would be very different. But when life comes and doesn't ask permission to uproot and destroy everything you thought was true about this world, then what? And
Hmm.
that's where that's the playground I like to play in, because to be honest, that's the most rawest. That is the nexus of, we gotta live a different way or we're not going to survive. How do we pave a new way that maybe nobody else has paved before? I have a tattoo on the back of my leg that is a suicide survivor. It's the semicolon.
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you heard of that for suicide? I'm a suicide survivor. The top is a compass, but the curly Q is a an old pen with a feather pen.
Right. Okay.
It reminds me that I need to figure out my own north, and I better be holding the pen in my story, and I will never, ever, 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 ever give up that right again. We all have a right and a responsibility to hold a pen and write our own story. Nobody else is going to write it for us. They're going to get it all fucked up and confused and wrong and misunderstood.
Hmm.
We have the story, we have the expertise, we have the knowledge. We better not be shitting on ourselves by not utilizing it.
Hmm.
So find your own north, hold the pen to your own story. It's scary as hell. But the alternative is to be erased and to be ignored and neglected and left for dead and all of those things.
Oh, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. That was well said. And that's why, like I wrote this
Yes.
because everyone was saying, well, what happened? What happened to the kids? What happened? It's like, well, here's this. Here's your handbook to going through family court.
Right.
But
And and again, had you not written that, nobody else would have had that version of how to survive. This is why recovery groups are so strong. It's nice to have other people who've experienced it before, but the world just doesn't work that way. And sometimes there are things we need to experience first. And it's really crappy that we're the ones that have to write the fucking story about it. But
right,
here we are.
right,
We didn't ask for this, but we're gonna do something with it.
right, right.
I'm sorry. I get a little passionate about some of these things.
Oh, I don't blame you. I do too. And you also have a podcast, Clouded Compass.
I do. Clouded Compass, it is, again, trauma, harm reduction, and neurodivergence. Getting ready to do one about feminine nominons.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm going to do a series of 4 about very strong women who paved a way for the rest of us. And I can't wait it's going to be a series. I have one, my most popular one is from a couple Christmases ago, 12 Days of Gabor Mate. Highly
Oh,
recommend him. But
hmm.
he wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, and I cover the first 12 chapters of that in the 12 Days of Gabor Mate. Um, so yeah, I've got some popular podcasts, but if anybody wants to reach out to me, again, I offer private pay coaching, but I offer tools and courses. I offer podcast guests in the form of trauma and harm reduction, not necessarily legal space. But I would love to have a Q&A with your audience and have them send you questions for me to answer if I'm on again, because I think I don't think there's enough of us talking about the unspeakable. And
Hmm.
in my field, in my experience, we we're so worried about re-traumatizing people, which is fair,
Hmm.
that we kind of like avoid talking about trauma. But I like to go right in the guts of this. I like, the mud is where the lotus grows.
Right, right. And tearing off that Band-Aid,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Well, I'd
yeah.
I'd like to have you back on and
Wouldn't that be great?
don't jump off, okay? Slam and
Thank you
Cal.
so much.
Oh, hey, yeah, definitely. Slam the Gavel is a podcast, help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I thank you, Laurie Smith, and I appreciate all your wealth of knowledge. Thank you so
Ah,
very much.
thanks. Hope it was helpful.
Definitely.